Punahele Soriano versus Dusko Todorovic. We got minus 160 on Dusko and plus 140 on Punahele. And let's start off with Punahele, who a lot of people seem to not like as much anymore for some reason. Both fighters are undefeated. Punahele is obviously coming off a victory over Oscar Piahota back at UFC 245. So it's been over a year since we've seen Punahele in the cage. And going into taping this fight, I thought that this was a prime spot to go out there and fade to go out there and fade Punahele. Just kind of scrolling through Twitter and seeing most people's opinions on it, I was kind of like, okay, everybody seems to be pretty one-sided on Dusko here, and we've slowly started to see the money start to come back on Punahele. It did open up, I believe, near a pick'em, and we've seen a lot of money coming in on Dusko, but the money started to come back on Soriano at this point in time, and after running the tape, I kind of understand why. So let's start off with Punahele, a Contender Series vet. That was the first fight where he was actually extended past the first round. The first time in his career he was actually extended past the first round, and he showed decent composure. It didn't seem like he was really panicking out there. Was able to secure takedowns against Jamie Pickett and really ride out that top position, land some good shots from on top. But it really showed the evolution of his game. Even in this fight against Oscar Piahota, we didn't really see a crazy pace from him right off the bat. I think Oscar Piahota's kind of style really brings that out of guys, but I thought we saw a little bit more of a patient Punahele, even though that fight still ended in that first round. We didn't really see him bum rushing, desperately forward, trying to find the chin of Oscar, but eventually he was able to find it and put him out about 3 minutes into that first round. But the kid is a thick dude. He's a big dude. And I feel like his strength is definitely going to play a factor in most of his victories in his fights. And I think it's going to be a big part of this fight against Dusko as well, too. He still has a little bit of work to do when it comes to sharpening up his game with more combinations rather than just blitzing forward with big hooks and strikes. But it's worked out for him up until this point. Obviously, he wasn't able to put out Pickett, but we saw that he was able to adjust on the fly, get the fight to the ground, and get it to a pace where it allows him to not really gas out, but also give him an opportunity to kind of catch his breath while still controlling the fight and scoring on the judges' scorecards, which eventually that fight did end up going to, and he did win a decision in that fight. I truly thought that he was a first round robust fighter, and we can't really 100% say that that's the type of the fighter that he is, because the only time we've seen him outside of the first round, he did go out there and win a decision, and he went about it in a very intelligent manner, in my opinion, which is going after the takedown, getting the fight to the ground, and kind of just riding out that top position. He seems like a very strong opponent. He seems like his explosion is very good too, in terms of being able to get to that point where he explodes forward with a bunch of punches, initiates the clinch and then goes straight for that double leg, and more often than not is able to secure it. Dusko, on the other hand, a little bit more lighter on his feet, uses his kicks very well too, almost has a karate type of stance, but we saw a little bit more of a patient approach from him against against Daquan Townsend, which was his last fight. That was a fight where I thought, Townsend would have a little bit more success being a big dude and having a ton of experience, but Dusko actually kind of just squashed that. He did a good job of kind of, corralling Townsend up against the cage, doing some good work in the clinch, and then eventually getting the fight to the ground and getting that finish in the second round. However, I do feel like there are still question marks regarding Dusko's cardio itself. He did win that fight against Teddy Ash on the Contender Series, but to me, even though he won that third round, it did seem like there were opportunities for opponents to take advantage of him and the state that he was in that third round. Now, the majority of that Teddy Ash fight was spent up against a cage where he was showing off a good head position in the clinch, kind of forcing his forehead into the chin and the neck area of Teddy Ash to keep him up against the cage, and then doing magnificent work to the body with his uppercuts and the damage that he's doing with his hands. Very, very impressive for sure. I think the kid has a ton of potential as well, too. he moves better than Punahele. I think he has a higher ceiling than Punahele as well too. But at this point in time, I think Soriano could absolutely pull off the upset victory here as the underdog. I do think that Puna has a ton of power in his hands, and not often I'll side with guys that seem to only have that one path to victory, which is getting guys out of there early. But that's kind of what Todorovic's game was as well before coming over to the UFC. He was getting guys out of there pretty early, where we didn't really get to see much of his cardio tested later in fights. Like the Teddy Ash fight went to a decision. It's funny that both of their Contender Series fights went to a decision, and that's really the only decisions that they won in their career, or the only fights that have ever gone to decisions in their career. So um, I think this is a perfect time for them to really get matched up against each other to see who might have a better career in the UFC. But at this point in time, I think Punahele could land that big punch to absolutely drop and hurt Todorovic even later in fights. The one qualm that I have with Todorovic's stand-up game is he relies heavily on like his head movement to get him out of the way of these big shots and kind of just leaning backwards, not really cutting angles well when he's trying to be defensive, kind of just moving backwards and just, pulling his head back. Sure, it's worked for him up until this point, but eventually it's going to catch up to him. Just ask Anderson Silva. You know what I mean? That's how he eventually ended up losing his title and stopping that run that he had going through the middleweight division. And that's kind of what I'm seeing from Dusko here in terms of his defense. Like his hands are more often down, more often than not down, rather than actually being up and kind of protecting from any of the shots coming his way. And he leans back a lot, and he's thinking that's going to save him more often than not. I feel like Punahele could actually land in those types of situations where, he's very explosive moving forward. His winging shots covers so much range, and I think that might catch up to Dusko in this fight. But even if this fight does get extended, I kind of side with Punahele's ability to get the fight to the ground, and we have a small sample size of that, so it's hard to say how efficient he will actually be in those certain situations. But I feel like Puna definitely has more power than Todorovic. He seems like the stronger dude. He should be able to bull rush his way into those clinch positions and possibly get those takedowns as well too. Todorovic, we did see some good top position from him against Townsend, especially dealing with Townsend, who was squirming a lot and trying to buck his opponent off of him. But Todorovic did a really good job of kind of just flowing with the movements and eventually getting that TKO finish. But I think Puna is going to be a different animal here. So I like Puna. I'm not sure enough to the point of actually betting him. Plus 140 is not a bad line, especially in a fight where I think it's a little bit more 50-50. So if people do feel that way, there is a bit of an edge and value on Puna in that line. And that's where I'm kind of leaning. Again, I'm not sure if I'll bet it, but I think he has a very solid shot of going out there and beating Todorovic and springing this upset. So I do like Puna to win this fight. I think he gets it done inside the distance as well too. I think he has a ton of power in his hands. His durability is off the charts too. I'm not sure why people are riding home about Todorovic. If you get it at a pick'em line, I understand at that point, but at that minus 150, minus 160 range, I do favor Punahele too. So I'm going to go with Puna to win this fight via KO, probably first or second round. I think he lands that bomb, but I also think that he overpowers Todorovic as well. So if this fight does get into deeper waters, I could absolutely see him being successful with his strength, getting Todorovic down. And I don't think that Todorovic will get away with his clinch work that he's been able to be successful with his past opponents. I don't think he'll be able to do that to Puna, at least not enough to, score rounds or anything like that. I think we'll see a little bit more from Puna here. So I'm going with Puna. I think he definitely live to win this fight as an underdog. He is a live underdog, like I'll say. But yeah, I'll go with Puna to win this fight, first or second round KO.